Well, welcome to The Greater Good. This is our second episode. I'm so excited to be here. I hope there's like people cheering and hands clapping in the background. This is our second episode of The Greater Good here at 239 Studios. And thanks to Tim and Diana for that. We love this studio. We are happy to be here. And I am joined today by two pillars in our community that are just awesome, all around awesome people. But they're going to drop some serious knowledge on you today. But before we get there, I wanted to tell you a little bit about The Greater Good. And I have a little cheat sheet here. So with your permission, I mean, this is only my second episode. Okay. So I'm still going to have to, I don't have it put to memory yet. But The Greater Good is a show created to share untold stories of purpose, inspiration, and hope. Our focus is on individuals in the community making a difference for the greater good and you know, just that little change the world. Yeah. So no pressure. But today our guest is Miss Sheryl Soukup and Miss Huff. And you got to talk to me about the E at some point. I need to understand the E.
It's for entertaining.
It's entertaining Sue. That's a movie. That's so many different things all in one. Yeah. So these ladies have been just absolutely superb on all the things that they have helped guide people to do in not just the nonprofit realm, but also with businesses in general. But before we go deep and do that deep dive, what I want to do is introduce you to the audience. So Sheryl, if you would start just, where did all this start for you? Who are you? Where'd you come from? And give me all the wonderful details.
Okay. Well, I'm Sheryl Soukup, and I'm the president of Soukup Strategic Solutions. And our company provides consulting services for nonprofit organizations. That's our deal. It's all nonprofits. And we really are here to help them maximize their impact. So we do that through strategic planning, board development, fundraising, marketing, grant writing, a variety of different services. And that's really what I've dedicated my life to over the last, 11 years in this business. But then before that, as a nonprofit CEO. So worked in nonprofits really most of my career and find it very rewarding and fulfilling.
Good. Well, that's the important thing at the end of the day, right? I mean, we want to feel like we've made a difference.
Of course, if you can make your passion your job, then it does not feel like working.
Yeah, I love that. That's very true. Miss Sue, over to you.
How long you have? I mean, I have a long career. I'm a lot older than both of you. So it's like I have a long career. So then nuts and bolts or just what I'm doing now, or what would you like to know?
Well, give me just the 10,000 foot view. So you started out, when you entered the business. I was born.
Born a small child.
You were born a small child.
I'm an Appalachian child. So it's like, I've come a long way from being an Appalachian baby. People used to think that Appalachian children were the ones, we always had dirt floors and people used to drop in the care packages. No, I lived just in a suburb and, like everybody else, and had neighbors. And
you weren't dropped in by the stork?
No. So, but, when I was, okay, we'll just go way back because the shows, you have enough time here.
Yeah.
I used to always watch Johnny Carson with my mom, my grandma and stuff. I was always a night out kid. And I used to think, when I grow up and I'm interviewed by Johnny Carson, this is what I'm going to tell him, that I used to always watch him. Wow. So I always wanted to be TV, theater, movies. So and I haven't made it yet, but thank you for having me on your podcast. So this could be my chance.
Thank you for the Johnny Carson comparison.
But I always wanted to be, I just always wanted to entertain. So how do you make money doing that if you're not?
I'll tell you when I figure it out.
So I've always been like, I started out in the newspaper industry. I was married young, and my ex-in-laws worked at the Daytona Beach News Journal. I was living there, and I started out in newspapers. So I am so thankful that. And I told my ex-husband and my ex-father-in-law this past summer, thank you, because I wouldn't have the career I have now unless I started out there, because everything leads, people go like, well, I want that job. Well, you don't always just get that job. It's like, how does it all your steps lead there. So I started out in newspapers, and then from newspapers, I went into commercial printing, from commercial printing to owning, partners in a chain of print shops, from partners in a chain of print shops to managing the department of printing for the city of Cincinnati, where I had gone to broadcasting school. In the meantime, I was in a theater company in Cincinnati, but I got to they had this bad stuff happen in the city of Cincinnati. Some, employees were doing bad stuff. And I went, hey, why don't we because they had a cable office, they had 400,000 viewers. Why don't we have a public relations show that's really positive and show what the good city employees are doing? Because you're always going to have 10% of your employees or 10% of your clients or something that are not doing things correctly, right? So I did this. I said, can I do this show? And they said, well, if you produce it. And I said, I'll produce it as long as I can host it. So I produced and hosted a show there for like 4 or 5 years, won a blue chip award for that. And then decided I don't want employees anymore. I want to do consulting. And my employees go, well, how do you know how to do that? And I went, I'm Isu Huff. I'll figure it out. So I packed up
You sure did figure it out.
I picked up the car and I moved to Beverly. I moved to Naples. And I just came down and I had to network for a while, and I did some outside sales and I did some things, but it took me 2 years. But I started doing consulting for marketing and management consulting for small to mid-sized businesses and nonprofits. And it's just because if I get excited about something, my clients get excited about it. So if somebody tells me something, I go, oh, I see the possibilities. And so I've built my business on possibilities of what is possible. And I just get excited about that. And that's what I do now. And so I do marketing and management consulting for small to mid-sized businesses in Southwest Florida.
Well, I'm glad you brought up yes.
Wow.
Yeah, that's yeah.
I don't feel like I did a very good job answering my question after that.
We'll add time on for you. Let's go right ahead.
Well, it's and I've watched Sheryl. She didn't say, but I've watched Sheryl's over the last 20 years, maybe. How long have you been in?
20. Yeah.
I've watched her progression over 20 years. And I'm like so amazed going, she is so smart. I mean, she is
one of the smartest ladies I know.
She has put this together. And I'd see her at the grocery store and go, what are you doing now? And she's going, I'm doing this. Wow. Because I just knew her when she was just doing like one little thing. And now she has this huge thing all over the world, international, global, I think. Intergalactic folks.
We will conquer the universe someday.
Right.
But yeah, she's very. I'm like always very impressed and awe. So yeah.
Well, for my first two shows, it's
mutual.
It's pretty amazing to have the brain trust here because from my wife Hope Daly, who is one of the smartest people. I mean, I swung for the fences. And thank God I hit the home run and landed her. But yeah, having you two and Shannon start our first two episodes. I was really, and I'm very comfortable around you guys, so it just makes it that much easier.
Good, so glad.
It really does. But that was one of the reasons I really thought this is a perfect platform and opportunity to talk about you guys' expertise, because while you guys do work with businesses and nonprofits, you come at it two different ways and you represent a lot of different aspects separately, but together, I mean, it's like the dynamic duo, right? So not to have is that a Super Friends reference? I think I just made
I don't know, but we're going to get a t-shirt.
Do you feel like a hero?
We're going to get a t-shirt.
Affecting the greater good.
Yes.
So yeah, and bringing that up, I mean, there's so many different paths that people walk, especially when they're in business and when they're in nonprofits. And knowing how do I tackle this? How do you eat an elephant one bite at a time, right? I mean, hopefully no one's out there eating elephants because I just don't imagine that's tasty.
Not the vegetarians.
No, definitely. Or vegans, right. Which you would think, I used to think they were the same thing. Right. Oh, I was horribly wrong and I will never make that correlation again. But so if you would share with me some of the biggest challenges that you see today that nonprofits and businesses alike are facing kind of with the ever-changing marketplace and the ever-changing just really landscape of business and nonprofits as a whole.
Well, you want me to go first?
Oh, yes.
Okay. Well, some of the biggest challenges. There's a lot of challenges, a lot of rewards, but challenges too. And I think one of the biggest challenges is keeping up with technology. What are all the changes going on in the world today, and knowing when to kind of shift from old school ways of doing things to starting to embrace what's coming down the road. And so I say that because there's a lot of nonprofits who have an older donor base, and trying to figure out, fundraising is so much a part of every nonprofit that is a fundraising organization. And so if you don't have resources, you can't fulfill your mission. So fundraising is key. And when you're fundraising with an older donor population, you can't move forward with what's available until your donor base is ready. You can nudge them along, but you have to be really careful not to lose them as you're doing that. So in this world that is rapidly changing, with so many different opportunities to advance the way that you do things using technology, we just have to make sure that people aren't left behind. So I think that's a very big challenge. There's many others, but what do you think about that, Sue?
Well, I agree, because I have one nonprofit that I work with now that everybody's going like, oh, we don't need to do printed pieces anymore. We don't need to do printed newsletters. We don't need to do mailings. We don't need to do letters. We are just going to do everything electronic. And I agree. You got to know your donor base.
Mm-hmm.
This nonprofit that I'm talking about has most of their donors over 65.
Mm-hmm.
I would say 75% of their donors over 65. Those donors like to see an 8-page newsletter that has photos of the events, photos of the people they're serving. They like to have something that comes in the mail, because and I'm in that group over 65, and I don't like to admit it, so don't tell anybody. But when I get electronic newsletters, I go, I'll read it later. Do I ever read it? Maybe 10% of the time, if there's something there.
Mm-hmm.
I don't. If it's just one thing that comes to me in an email, it's just one happy hour they're having or one event, I'll read that. But I am not going to read an electronic newsletter. I don't care how great it is. And so they changed the last newsletter. I was getting ready to do their newsletter, and they changed it. And I went, are you sure you want to do this? And the new board chair said, yeah, she wants to do it. So it's just time will tell what happens, but you've got to know your donors. And I think a lot of people are, thinking like, oh, this is, we get with the times. Well, get with the times, but do both. How about doing electronic for the younger? Do it both. Do it in print. And so I think that's one of the one big things now is the challenges is like, how are we pivoting? That word pivot, we did that during COVID. Everybody's got to pivot.
Oh, yeah.
And I think a lot of people pivoted to electronic everything, electronic meetings, but it's just not for everybody until all of us over that age are gone, cater to us, because we're the ones probably giving you money.
Right.
No, that's a really good point. You definitely have to identify who that ideal avatar is as your donor and your donor base, but you can't, be deaf to the fact that you have other donors and you want to prepare that next generation of donors.
You got to do
That's right.
both.
You
You got to do both. You have to do both.
And
now.
don't you feel that comes from it? Number one, you have to have the medium, but you have to have the why. You have to have the message. And so your message has to be able to speak. It kind of has to transcend demographics.
Yes.
Talk to me about that. How do you get the why out there? How do you get the message right?
So we do something with a lot of our clients called message mapping. And so we start with the mission and the vision, two very important things, of course, making sure that they have those right. And then we develop a main message for the organization. You can do a message map for just for the organization as a whole, or you can do it for just one campaign. Like if you have a capital campaign, you could do it for that. Or if you have one specific program, you can do a message map for the program. But you decide on your main message and then 3 key supporting messages. And then we talk about basically what are all of those the main message, the 3 key messages, and then your supporting messages below each of the 3 key messages. And so what you end up having is a 1-page kind of internal cheat sheet that helps you to really clarify that message and get everybody talking about the organization in the same way, using the same type of language, but then they can adapt that for their own personal experiences with the organization. So it creates some consistency. It helps to reinforce the brand. It gives some very targeted language, and it allows the organization to start thinking about when different people bring up different ways of saying things. They may not all agree about how something is being presented, and it allows them to kind of work through that process of considering, how are we going to present ourselves? So I'll give you an example. I was in a committee meeting with one of our clients, and that client uses education as one of their programmatic activities. It's all over their website. It's in their grant applications. It's in a lot of their communication materials. And somebody that is a board member was on the Zoom call for the committee meeting, and we were talking about messaging, and she brought up that, well, we don't like to use the word educate because we feel like that has connotations that represent an imbalance. You need to be educated. There's an implication that somebody needs to be educated. And so other board members who happen to be on the committee and other committee members were, in agreement. Oh, okay, yeah, that kind of reflects our values. So we weren't able to get into a deep discussion about that day. But to me, I'm thinking, ding, 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 that's a red flag that we've got people who are leaders of the organization that don't want to use that word, yet it's all over all of their materials.
So there's a disconnect.
So my advice to the CEO and board chair was, hey, we really need to do some message mapping to discuss among your organization's leaders, and then diffuse it throughout all of your communications, whether oral, verbal, or in writing, how you speak about this thing that you do that you currently call education. If you're not going to call it educate, they threw on some other language, connect. We're going to be connecting or connectors or make connections. Well, if that's the word that you decide to use, that's great. But we have to then make it consistent across the organization. Sure. So that would be an example. When you're doing message mapping, these kinds of things come up, and you have an opportunity to really think through how you're going to communicate about your organization.
Right. And mine's pretty simple. I just say, be short, be clear, and be consistent. Because like Sheryl was saying, it's like, if people are not consistent when they're out in because let's just be honest, there's a lot of nonprofits in our area.
Mm-hmm. There are
a lot of nonprofits, more than I don't know any area in the world that has this many nonprofits, really, and successful nonprofits.
Yes, very
not just nonprofits, but successful nonprofits, because we're a very fortunate area. We have a lot of donors here, and very blessed to have them here. But if people aren't consistent when they're out and about in town networking, because let's be honest, when we're networking, that's what we're doing. We're talking about what nonprofit we're associated with, what board we're on, who you work for, who's really got an event coming up. But if the message of like what they do isn't consistent and isn't clear, it just kind of goes, ugh. And there are some organizations in town still that I go like, now exactly what did they do? I mean, I know like something, but I don't have that clear thing. I always say that I'm like a crash dummy. If I can understand it, anybody can. Just use me as your test dummy, know, because just make it clear enough that it's layman's terms, clear enough of like, what are you excited about doing for the people you serve? And if you're excited about what you're doing for the people you serve, like Sunlight Homes is like, I've known, and Shannon was on, your previous show. And I've known that organization for years and years and years. It's like when even they opened their first home, I bought a brick out because I knew somebody that was on the board. Well, then I lost touch with them until Shannon was there. So we really, and Shannon then starts talking about them. So it's really, who's out there talking about your nonprofit?
I have to agree, because I didn't even ever, all the nonprofit work that we do here in town, I never heard of that organization until Shannon started working with them.
Right.
Yep.
Same
Right.
here.
Yeah. And so, and I knew because I knew one of the board members, but you have to be out there and you have to be consistent. It has to be short and concise. So I know that they are for unwed mothers who are homeless or have had some kind of trauma or addiction, and they are long-term program. Now, I got that just from Shannon saying, I don't know what their huge mission is, what it says, but I know what they do. So if I know what a nonprofit does, I can either decide like that's something I want to get behind or not get behind. And that's where your donors, you have like 10, 15 seconds to kind of make that impression on what that organization does. If it's the passion that comes through. And so if your mission or your statement, we used to call them back in the old days, we used to call them those elevator speeches, but now I guess it got to be escalator speeches. But I used to, when I used to do a lot of seminars and teaching, I would go, have your first floor, this is what we do. You get them captive in an elevator for you're only going one floor. Tell them who you are and what you do. And it's like, it's got to be that passion statement. If you're going to the second floor, add that extra sentence of what other programs. If you're going to the penthouse, you've got like 30 seconds to tell them what all you're doing. So have those add-ons, but have that short, concise, consistent statement that really captures the passion you have for the nonprofit.
Now that is the message map.
Oh,
It's you start with that main message and then you go to your supporting message and then you have all that opportunity.
We rehearsed
I was going to say,
we
it's
rehearsed
almost
this.
like you guys work together or something. I'm glad that worked out.
I just think that's so great. And that conciseness, being able to say everything in a very concise way. We were at that event for Sunlight Homes last night, and Shannon had her very concise, specific message that was, she only really had 3 key things.
Right.
I mean, she talked about the fact that
She was good.
Yeah, she did. She talked about the fact that there were unwed mothers that they were serving, and that some of them had been human trafficking victims, but not all.
Right.
Right.
We
got that from that. And then she talked about love, that their organization is steeped in love.
Yeah.
And so I'm sure.
And long term.
Yeah. And long term. She was really specific about that. Those were the 3 key messages for her.
And they can have 6 women and 12 children.
Yeah. But that's a supporting statement.
They really do.
I mean, we learned all of that last night.
And she only
in
spoke
very
for
short.
like 3 minutes.
Yeah.
3
well,
minutes.
and they really do a good job of making
concise
them. Yeah, it's very concise messaging, but they also follow through with that messaging, and they become the families for those girls, which is just huge.
Right.
So, I mean, do you think is that the biggest miss? Is that the biggest miss that nonprofits, when they're out there trying to either establish their brand or derive support or volunteers or donations, is that their biggest miss? Or what do you think is the biggest, I don't want to say miss, but challenge that they're facing?
Well, okay, there's so many challenges, but I
know that's a loaded question.
But one thing I'll say is that we've had many nonprofits that we've started working with. When we come in, we do a mini organizational assessment, unless they're doing strategic planning, and then we do a full org assessment. But in the mini org assessment, we'll be looking at things like their marketing and communications, their fundraising, a variety of different things within the organization. And we will often find that they're using their mission statement in different ways in different places. And that is that is one big no-no. So one thing that we do is we will give them, for their board, a board resolution that says this is the mission statement. The one and only mission statement is that is approved for use. And then we ask the staff to go through and change any other mission statement that does not align with those exact words, just so that they're not using it different places, different ways, different places. And you might see it one way in a grant application, one way on a donation envelope, a different way on their website. What if you can't even get your mission statement right? That's kind of crazy. So I would say that's of the most basic. I think a bigger picture issue is that a lot of nonprofit organizations don't dedicate enough resources in their annual budget to the fundraising and marketing work that they have. And that's just a sector-wide problem in the nonprofit sector, that there's this pressure for nonprofits to spend as much money as possible on the programs. But if you don't invest in communication, marketing, and fundraising, you're not going to have the resources that you need to grow your organization. So what I often see happen is that a nonprofit will grow its programming at a pace at a rate that outpaces their fundraising. And then they get into a crisis situation because their programming has grown so much and they really can't afford to keep it going. And then you have a sustainability problem. And every organization is looking at how can we fundraise? How can we fundraise? It's one of the reasons why we get called in most often is for fundraising support. But, some of it goes right back down to that sector-wide issue of donors and funders expecting nonprofits to spend the majority of their money on programming. And it's somehow evil to spend your money on marketing or
Which
fundraising.
Is the one thing that would grow
what business would ever operate that way? No for-profit businesses that are able to really grow and scale would ever say, we're not going to spend more than 1% of our budget on marketing.
Right.
That's just silliness.
That's the exact opposite of what Lee Iacocca always said. He said, I would spend 90% on marketing and 10% on research and development. Seriously. I mean, and he did,
I know.
I'm dating myself.
No,
there
I love
but I mean, it was a great book.
reference.
I loved his book too.
Yeah.
I love that book.
It was an amazing book.
Yeah.
And it really teaches you, the value of, it's wonderful. You can have the best thing out there, but if nobody knows about it, what good are you doing?
So that I would say is one of the things that we get most often when we interview board members in the strategic planning process. We interview every single board member and we ask them about a variety of things, but we ask about one of the weaknesses of the organization. And many of them say most often, I would say the most often cited weakness is that the community doesn't know us. We don't do enough to create awareness about our organization. And then when we talk about opportunities, that's also one of the things that comes up most often. We have all these opportunities to make the community aware. So those two things, having that weakness, but having that opportunity, I think nonprofits need to really budget wisely to help the community understand what it is that they're offering to them. They have this really big opportunity. The community has a big opportunity to invest in that mission. So if they can show their impact, they can show that the solution that they've come up with for a community-wide problem is one that is effective, and that the donors, if they invest, will have impact, then that's easy. But they have to be able to communicate that message out. What is the problem? What is the solution that the nonprofit is offering? And then how can the donor get involved? What is the impact going to be if the donor does invest in that organization? The same thing for volunteers too, or any other kind of supporter, not just donors, but.
Yeah. I agree. No.
That's the shortest answer that you've had today.
No, I agree. But we had talked before, it's like, I think one of the big mishaps is like build it and they will come kind of mentality. And I think a lot of board members do think that, because I have one organization that was shocked of like how much money was spent on operations and marketing, and it was like, less than like 5% of everything, but they just thought that was a lot of money. And it was crazy because you want to, the cliche, you want to create a win-win, but you do want to create a win-win. You want to, and you want to keep building. Like Sheryl said, it's like thinking that you can build your donor base and you might have a donor base now, but what about those new donors coming in? Because you might have the people that founded that nonprofit. Now they're still supporting it, but they're aging out. So who are the new people? So will that nonprofit die when those people pass away, or will it flourish because now they're building in new? So I think a big misconception and big mistake too is I hear people say like, nobody knows about our nonprofit. We haven't had good press. We haven't had good coverage. Well, think about, we don't all read the same magazines. We don't all read the same newspapers. So a nonprofit could have had, Sheryl could have had a group that had a front page story in the Naples Daily News, an article in a magazine, something else. But then a new board member comes on and goes, I've never heard of your organization. Well, you weren't reading those particular magazines. So you can't put everything into print media. You can't
True.
put everything into your newsletter. You have to be consistent, and you have to brand across the board. Branding across the board, being involved with other nonprofit organizations, being involved with other community organizations, partnering with businesses, partnering with community events. I mean, you have to continually brand. And the board members, that should be one of the things that they help do, is continually brand, because you don't know how many people go like, oh, I've never seen anything about that nonprofit. Well, they were on the front page of Naples Daily News just not that long ago, but not everybody reads the Naples Daily News now, and not everybody reads digital online newspapers. I'm sorry to say, but they don't. We look at the headlines, and that's, about it. If it doesn't interest us, if it's not in our wheelhouse, we don't look at it. So it is a challenge now. It's like, it's not a small town to where we only get our news from 2 or 3 different sources and we're all looking all the time. It's changed. We have to be more aware and more, I think, diligent in really being out there and really strategically putting that brand and that mission and that vision and that message. We really have to be very strategic about that.
Well, so that really speaks to, and something that we've heard quite a bit is that the engagement of the organization from everybody, from the volunteer all the way up to the board. We've heard several people say, well, we just can't seem to get everyone engaged. And if you had engagement across the board, that would hopefully bring about a solution. However, if you don't have the consistency of message and you don't have the vehicles to get that message out there, so it, really.
And if you don't
understand
if you don't fund the
different
staff person, if you don't fund the staff person to do the marketing, the engagement, how does that just levels out, right? It just goes kind of flatline.
So there's this challenge in getting from like the small, tiny startup nonprofit to, to kind of like the next stage where you have sustainability. And there's always this challenge when everything is done all by volunteers, there can be this burnout, right? You try. Everybody's working so hard. They're all volunteering their time. People are really like super charged up and passionate about the organization and the mission, and they don't know what they don't know, but they're really working really hard, and they start to get like a critical mass of people getting involved, right? And donating and that sort of thing. So if you get to a certain point and it starts to take off, then maybe you can hire your first staff person. But getting to that point, there's always that time where you're trying to figure out how you're going to get everything done. And hiring that first staff person, sometimes you need, if you don't have really good volunteers and you don't have any professional guidance, it can be really hard, and organizations can get stuck in that time period. Once you get a staff person in, then you have the ability to start to professionalize things and move things forward. But some of the nonprofits never get to that point, or it takes them 10, 20 or more years just to get to that point where they can hire somebody. And that the longer and that you go with only volunteers, the less likely it is that you're ever going to get to that point and that you're going to keep going. And so we've seen some of the nonprofits, at least in this town, just end up closing their doors or merging with another nonprofit because they could never get over that hump and hire that first person.
Do you think that if they could engage with a for-profit business that sees the mission and the vision, it would help them get over that because they're already established, they have an established brand? I mean, how important is it that they find some business or corporate sponsors?
Well, corporate sponsorships that's a huge help, and that can really help them move forward. I think sometimes they don't know how to do that, and that's why we work with some small startup nonprofits, because they don't know just how to get to the next level. They don't know how to engage sponsors. So, I think if they have really great board members who know what they're doing, then they start to put all those pieces into place. If the board members are really well networked in the community and they can bring corporate sponsors to them, that's a way that they can move forward. If they have really strong programming and they are measuring outcomes after they've been around for a while, they can start to apply for grants. And so some of the grants can be seed money. So you can either have corporate sponsorships, or you can have some nonprofit fundraising events, or you can have some grant funding to kind of seed that next stage. But if you cannot get to that point, that you get stuck.
I think it's like critical to have businesses and nonprofits work together. I mean, that's what we call community, right? Yeah,
for sure.
You know, businesses are in it to make a profit, but that some of that profit then needs, when I say needs, it needs to go back in the community, because they're making profit in a community that has nonprofits that serve the community. So it all circles around. So since I have nonprofits and for-profit clients, I always my clients know that I will always, part of their marketing plan is they always will be tied up or partnered with some nonprofits. And so it depends on that client. So if it's a client that deals with I don't know, like, let's just say air conditioning, an air conditioning company, what nonprofit might be a good fit for them? Is it like homeless shelters? Is it something, like that? So it's like I try to pair them up with what makes sense for them. Mm-hmm. So it's not just a one-time sponsoring a golf tournament, but it's actually a partnership. Yeah. So it's like it's creating partnerships with corporations, with nonprofits, and you never know what somebody's story is. Years ago, I had, for like 10 years, I had an organization that was that had served foster children, and I had a client that I didn't know had been a foster child. So when I told him about this organization, I mean, he was just teary-eyed. And so now he's been involved in that organization for 10 years or more years and stuff. Big sponsor, because he knows what they're doing. So it's finding it, and that's through networking. That's through knowing the community. That's knowing people. What's that person's story? Was that person, did that person have a house that burned down and maybe they want to be really a donor with the Red Cross? So those nonprofits that touch somebody's heart are the most likely the ones that somebody's going to sponsor. So it's kind of hard just to go cold calling and say, oh, would you like to sponsor this golf tournament? Well, I might sponsor a hole, or I might do something, but I'm not tied to that nonprofit. So you want to tie the business and the nonprofit together. You want to tie those corporate sponsors, and you want to have them tied together at a heartstring, and then the purse string comes.
Can I add something to that?
Oh, yes.
Yeah. So I want to give an example. We were recently contacted by, just like cold call random, a nonprofit here in Naples. And they wanted a corporate sponsorship, but they didn't have any relationship with our business. And also they didn't know that my family was helped by that nonprofit. And so I think one mistake that nonprofits make is that they think that you can just call up any business in town and just get a corporate sponsorship. It's not like that. It's really all about relationships and finding that good fit. Either, as you just said, I think what you were trying to say was that it's either got to be a fit between the two purposes, the purpose and alignment between what the business has for a purpose and what the nonprofit has for a mission. Like if you can align those two purposes, then it can be a really good fit, and that there's that win-win you were talking about. Or the decision makers, you need to find out more about them and what is important to them, what their values are, what their story is. Yes, what's their background, what matters to them. And so I think that in general, nonprofits, when they are really successful at fundraising, it's because they are very, very successful with developing relationships and really learning about the donor. When nonprofits go out and they are trying to tell everyone about what they need instead of listening to what the donor needs and wants and where that connection is, then they miss the mark completely. So it's really about what's best for the donor. And,
Right.
in fundraising, ethics is a huge thing. And I think if you just, at the heart of it, if you start with what's right for the donor, even if that donor ends up not being right for your organization, like your organization is not right for them, maybe it's not at this time, but maybe you can connect them with another organization. You should be finding the right donor for your organization.
And I think we talked about assuming, don't assume things,
Oh yeah.
don't assume things, and don't assume that your board, this is another one that kind of gets under my skin. Board meetings and all the new board members, they all have these great ideas. We can do this, we can do that, we can do this. And then they leave the board meeting. Well, who's going to do it? And then nobody takes ownership. So, ideas are ideas until somebody takes an ownership of them and makes them happen. So because nonprofits don't have a big enough staff to follow through on all your ideas. So don't assume that people know about you. Don't assume people know your mission. Don't assume a business is going to be your sponsor if you don't have a relationship with them. It's all relationships. It's like I think people give to organizations they have a relationship with. And a relationship means that they've met somebody, they were impressed by a story that they read. We had Pelican Bay Journal. It just gets mailed to Pelican Bay. And I had an organization that we wanted a story in there. Well, they don't really do stories. So we bought a page and we did an editorial. So it looked like a story because I wrote it like a news article, and the pictures were in there. And do you know that we had somebody read that story and contacted us and gave us $50,000. So you never know where your donors are going to come from. So don't assume that something's not going to work. Don't assume it's going to work, but you have to be.
Can I say something?
Oh,
that?
Yes.
That is really so important what Sue is saying, because you don't know where they're going to come from. And sometimes it's so surprising. So I was on a board maybe about, I'd say 18 years ago, I can't remember exactly, but the organization invested in rebranding. And there were a lot of naysayers. Oh, we shouldn't be spending money on this. And they rebranded. They did a whole new website. And, a little bit of time went by. And then we got a call from an attorney, and a donor left over $1 million to the organization.
Wow.
And they looked through all their records, their donor records, and that individual had never donated to them before. And so, of course, the board attorney, there was an attorney on the board at the time, had, gone back to them and asked, what was the connection here? And as the executive committee reported back to the rest of the board later, it was because they were looking for somewhere to provide a charitable gift in their will, and they were not connected with this organization, but they had learned about them from their website and decided that was a gift that they wanted to make to the organization.
You never know.
You don't ever know.
No.
And I'll tell another example. I was working as an interim director of development for or director of advancement for a private school. And they had a series of news coverage. They had a series of press releases that went out and some story pitches, and that they had gotten some really good coverage. Well, there was this older couple who was living out on Pine Island, this was in Lee County, and oh my gosh, they didn't have any children, and they had a really successful business, and they had a lot of land and a lot of resources, and they had nobody to leave it to. And he, back to the whole idea of who are you and what has gone on in your life that's meaningful to you. This person saw the coverage and decided that no connection to the school whatsoever, decided that they were going to leave the remainder of their estate to this private school. Wow. Came in, met with us, got the language, had their attorney write it into their will. So that
it's telling the story. Telling the story, and how
those things would not have happened if they didn't have that investment in of time and expertise and resources into marketing, and communications.
Because you want to be on TV as much as you can. You want to, what's going on that's newsworthy. That's what I always tell my nonprofits. Is like we try to every month. What do you got's newsworthy? Well, no, let's make a newsworthy story out of that. Let's do something. And so, because a lot of nonprofits do a lot of things that they don't think that's just routine, but it's newsworthy maybe to somebody else. I work with Paws Assistance Dogs, Golden Paws Assistance Dogs, and everybody loves dogs. I mean, the puppies are so cute. So we just try to get them on the news as much as possible. And, we get them on the news, and it's like those people see those puppies. It's like, oh, they're so adorable. And it's like, and they're helping veterans and children and stuff. So you've just got to do the warm fuzzy. I mean, the warm fuzzy and the one that makes you cry. It's like, we talk about that. It's like when I do videos for clients, I want the ones that are going to make the people at the dinner cry. And if they're crying, I know their purse is opening, and I don't, I just don't want that statement thing. I want the emotion. It's like, because you work on emotion, and I'll be interviewing the kids and they'll be crying. And I go, it's okay. That's our money shot. That's our money shot.
It is. I mean, it's really important that you get to the heart of the matter. And, when you've got to the heart, when those people are, they're engaged.
Being emotional.
They're engaged. And you guys spoke about it so well, that legacy piece that's an education thing. That, people need to know that about their financial future. Anyway, I don't know how much that's being done these days. I have a financial advisor and planner. So thankfully, I learned about legacy planning and things like that. That's an important piece. But another thing you guys touched on.
Oh gosh, everybody should have a will.
I want
absolutely.
Can I add something else?
Yeah, of course.
Can I add something? Because one time you said, a picture's worth 1,000 words, but a video's worth 1,000,000 words 1,000,000 times over. Yeah. I don't know if you said it just like that, but something like
You're
that.
Close.
But so many organizations don't want to invest in a video. And the video is going to tell the story. The video is going to tell a different story than you just getting up. You've got to touch like, somebody that was served, and it's like, and they get emotional. It's like how they wouldn't have survived without the help of this nonprofit. That's what touches, that's what touches. And it's like, you guys do incredible jobs with videos, and you work with so many nonprofits, and but you've got to have the video. And then for the board to go, well, we can do that ourselves. I don't know if they sound like that, but anyway, that they can do that themselves. But
they can if they have somebody that has the expertise
Sure.
and is willing to either donate it or that, volunteer their time, but they have to have the expertise.
Yeah. But you've got to have the investment. It's like, and to have a professional, you got to have a professional.
Well, and like you guys said, you got to be willing to spend a little money on marketing.
Right.
The one thing that we've noticed lately is the marketing budgets are tight, but they can reallocate that video for multiple layers and multiple verticals within the organization. So you've got a big event. All right. So some of that can come out of the big event, but you also have programs. There's a programs budget as well. You can reallocate and reuse a lot of those assets, and some of those videos can be cut in different ways so that you can also take some out of the programming budget. You can also take some out of the marketing budget. You can also take some out of the advertising budget. There are multiple different ways that you can get this paid for.
And you know what?
Yeah.
During the pandemic, we sent out one of my nonprofit clients. We sent out the video with kind of an appeal as an email. We sent out the video link, and we brought in like over $200,000 just from sending out an email. People like we saying, donate. Here's, we can't see you right now. But that videos can be very powerful.
One thing that we talked about, and I know it's important to engage sponsors, corporate sponsors, and I don't want to beat this drum to death, but how does the corporation, how do they benefit by this? This is something that I think, like you said, you touched on it. They get so focused on their mission and what they're doing. It's about, so that's a feature. Well, what's the benefit, and how does that tie into my success as well? Not that, look, corporations and businesses are tied to their bottom lines, and they're going to want to know, okay, great. I do want to serve my community, but how does this how does this help me? What's the benefit to our corporation?
So I want to answer that and then pass. You probably have a long answer for this, but I'm going to say no. I mean a really good long answer. I didn't mean that in a bad way. It's going to be good, but I'll have a short answer. We were just talking about this internally because we are a sponsor of Avow, and that's very, very like personal to me. But also Avow's our clients, so we want to support them. But every one of our clients is a nonprofit, so every one of them could be asking for a sponsorship, right? And it's very, very difficult to make those decisions. But when we are a sponsor, we want as a business to know how we can help that nonprofit as a sponsor. What do you want from us? I mean, we're going to give you the money, but how can we leverage our relationship for both of us? And then when we are picking organizations that we want to support, right now this year, we picked a couple of organizations that we wanted to support for pro bono work. We always choose some organizations to do pro bono work for, in addition to the cash sponsorships. And so one of them that we supported was the Women's Giving Circle. And we supported them with pro bono work because they help so many of the other nonprofits in the area. And that aligns with us. We want to see nonprofits across the whole community benefit. And so for us, that was a really good fit and alignment with us. So I think when nonprofits are asking for sponsorships, instead of thinking of it as a transaction, they should really be thinking of it, like you said, Sue, as a partnership. How do we work together to benefit both? Where is the win-win, the intersection between my mission and your mission? And what can we do together? How can we be creative together? So if not only the business, but also the nonprofit were to both benefit from the relationship, then it would be silly not to keep renewing it. Right? I mean, that's the golden area where both organization and nonprofit win, and so does the whole community. So that's what I think you're looking for, is that alignment between the two, and then get together and talk about it and be creative. What can we do together to enhance awareness in the community for both of us, or otherwise fulfill both of our missions or meet both of our organizations' needs? I think it needs to come from both sides, right. But if the nonprofit is not starting those conversations, then what you're really talking about is a transaction and not a partnership.
Yeah. Well, I guess we'll start with my vision, because we have a vision, we have a mission for our businesses. So personally, I'm a business for profit. So my vision is just to glorify God in everything I do. So which means is like, I'm being part of my community. I'm giving. I'm tithing. I'm giving back. And so when I take on a client, it's like I only take on clients that really resonate with me, mm-hmm. and that I feel are reputable. So when I suggest or have them partner with a nonprofit, it's because one, maybe they don't want anything back. Maybe they are just doing for the greater good. But other times it's like, it's like, it's a business, right? So are there donors and board members potential clients? Are we trying to build community awareness that we are a reputable company with integrity? Because businesses usually who are involved with nonprofits are more community minded, have more integrity, and are going to have more referrals from people that trust them. So there's a trust factor. I don't really trust that many businesses that aren't involved in the community, because if they're not really involved in the community, are they really going to be there for me if I have an issue? So there's a whole thing of branding, of mindset of this is a reputable company. I can trust them. They're community minded. They're good people. And are there donors? Are there people that come to their events? Are those potential clients? So if you're a realtor and you're partnered up with, like a gated communities golf tournament, well, those are your potential clients. So you want that brand recognition. So there is a win-win. And we've been using that word since the 80s, but it is a win-win. And so you're building, it's different things but what does the client want, and what do they, sometimes they just don't want any recognition, because it's like, don't let the left hand know what the right hand is doing, kind of thing. And that's those anonymous donors that we just put the sign out, anonymous donor.
Yep.
So it just depends on what that client is looking for. But a lot of times it's like I try to match them with the donor base and the board base and the people that will be coming to that event. Is that their client base? Is that potential clients for them? Is that the people they want to be seen for? And is that, how do they want to be recognized in the community? So that's kind of how I put them together.
So speaking of putting things together, you guys are joining forces. Is there, so I need to hear a little bit about this, or is this too soon? Are we allowed to reveal this on this?
I am so proud to work with this
Okay.
woman.
All right. Tell me about it.
So Sue and our team are working together, and so you'll be seeing some of her amazing work with some of our clients.
And it came about because I am getting a little bit older. I still can walk and everything, and get around.
You're
okay.
Timeless. You're absolutely timeless.
Timeless means like, okay, yeah, later. So I'm getting older, and I do get excited. That's, people go, how do you get your clients? I go, it's all referrals, but people usually hire me because I don't fake it. I just get excited when people tell me about something. If I don't get excited, I don't usually get that client. But when I hear about somebody's mission or their business, and it's like, I can go, we can do this. And so I get excited about it. And then but I don't want to be excited all the time. And have that client.
Takes a lot of energy.
Yeah. But to have a client, because I'm trying to kind of cut back a little bit. So having clients that are a responsibility, my clients are like almost like family members. So it's like I worry about them all the time. I'm like always in contact with them all the time. So I partner with them. I'm just part of their team. I'm not just like a consultant. It's like, but I'm part of their team. And so being part of somebody's team all the time, that's a lot. So I'm trying to cut back from being part of a team to just kind of like helping somebody out. Like, if Sheryl has a client that needs a press release or needs like a 3-month plan, I can do that. And then we're done. So it's not like I have them for years and I feel responsible and I can't go out of town. So it's like this, this is going to work out to where I'm sort of dating clients rather than marrying them.
So we marry them, but
Gotcha.
And I'll just kind of date them.
Yeah.
So
they're part of our, and I shouldn't say that, we're part of our family, and then you come in as the girlfriend.
Yeah. And
works.
I come in and I help, and I go, can I wash the dishes? Can I dry the dishes? And then I'm gone. So it's like, if I can help her clients, if Sheryl's clients, if I can help them in a certain area, that's great. If I can't help them, I'll go like, sure, I don't think they can do this one. So it's kind of this relationship of like, it's ebb and flow, which feels very good to me, because I still have my business. I still have my clients, but rather than taking on a client that's on retainer and then I'm with them like all the time, I can just do a short project and then it's done. And then
you're the favorite aunt.
Yeah.
So you get to come in, you get to
it.
hang out and babysit. And then when
then
you
give
give
them
them a
back.
bunch of sugar and make them all happy, and then while they're bouncing off the walls,
Well,
you get
we
to
like
leave.
to think of it as a little bit different. We like to think I'm the favorite aunt that comes in and gives them good advice,
Yeah.
Yes,
buys
there you
them-
go. I love
gives
that.
them a nice prom dress, and tells them, what they need to do. And then I go, best of luck, kind of thing. So,
Right.
yeah.
Well, all of that has been amazing. We're getting close to the end, so I'm gonna do our wrap up. But I do have a question for both of you. Our last question, and if you could change the world in any way for the greater good, what would it be?
That's a big one.
Oh my gosh. Well, after seeing that film last night.
Yeah, that was a really moving film.
Yeah, The Sound of Freedom. After seeing that, to make the world better, it's like, yeah, we've got to do something about human trafficking.
Yeah, human trafficking is really evil.
Yeah.
There was a lot of evil that brought to mind.
So I
in
think
film.
that's an issue that we need to bring more front of mind. And those organizations that are in town, they're dealing with human trafficking. I don't know, they don't, I don't know how big some of those are, but we really need to get behind those and support those organizations. I feel like we really need to do that. And that might be a great show for you.
Yeah, actually, it really is,
because it is a huge,
important.
it's a huge
to keep
topic.
talking about it.
It's a huge topic now. Keep talking about it. And to change the world, I think it would just be nice to each other.
Yeah, I think one thing about working in the nonprofit realm that is so wonderful is that sometimes it feels a little bit like a bubble, because I'm so blessed to be surrounded by generous people all the time. Right. I mean,
Right.
working with nonprofits, it's just, there's so much generosity. Everything is about helping. And so that's an awesome place to be. And so if the rest of the world outside of the nonprofit sector were at yes, don't get me wrong, there's lots of nice people and lots of, great businesses out there. But sometimes when I have to do something sort of like mainstream, I realize there are a lot of mean people out there. Like, niceness would be good. If we had more niceness, that would be really good. And I do want to say one other thing. If I would not be true to myself if I didn't also answer the question that you asked about making the world a better place with this in mind. My daughter, who I lost last year, had multiple disabilities. And I think the world needs to really treat people with disabilities in a better way. Really, I just think that, on the way over here, I was talking with my colleague Jacob about a friend in town who I know you both know, that Hope and I were talking about last night. And, the way that our government system works in supporting people with disabilities is failing so badly that, this one individual, she physically relies on other people to help her out of bed, get her into her wheelchair, and help her access food. And because she is on disability, in order to keep those services that allow her to live independently, she doesn't have a lot of extra income. So if they don't come, she doesn't have food, and if they don't come, she has to literally crawl to the bathroom for her personal care. Who lives like that?
Yeah.
We found, well, she
lives
called,
like that?
no one should.
I don't think that
So we need
anybody should.
more
We do.
awareness of
And
that.
I think people day to day who don't deal with those issues don't understand that there are people in our own community who don't have their basic needs met in that way. And so I just say, my daughter was fortunate that our family could care for her, but not everybody has a family that does that for them. And I think that we as a community need to be better about how we care for our community members, our neighbors with disabilities.
And I think what Leadership Collier says, we have to be informed, be engaged, and be the difference.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Good motto.
That's very true. I mean, that's powerful. That's a very powerful statement. And it's upsetting because there are days that go by when we're not sure if she's eaten, and so we're like, oh, we probably should check and make sure. It's just, it should never happen in this community. It should never happen in any community. Yep. And especially in a community with this much wealth and connected to this many nonprofits and businesses. I mean, it should never happen.
No. And since this show is all over, can be seen all over.
Yes.
Just challenge people just to be engaged in their community, know what's going on. Yeah. Know what's going on.
You do have to educate yourself and
know
listen, pay attention.
Pay attention, know what's going on in your community. Yeah. Know where the needs are, get involved.
Yeah, get involved.
Because we're all blessed. I mean, we're all just living way beyond.
Right.
So, and if you look at, you got to look at life that way. Sometimes, especially when you're down, just look at all the good you have. And sometimes it's hard to understand that and put that into perspective. And it's really important. Hey, I woke up today. I'm able to walk on my own.
Yep.
Right.
That's a huge, something that not a lot of people consider. Oh, I didn't think about it. I have the use of my hands today.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, it's things like that. Those are huge things.
And going back to the human trafficking issue, I'm free.
Yes.
I'm free.
You don't understand until you've given up freedom. You just don't understand what it means to be free.
Or had it taken from
you. Or had it taken from you. Yeah.
Right.
That's right. Well, Thank you guys so much. I
Thank
can't
you.
thank you
Thank you.
enough. It was a pleasure, absolute pleasure. I can't wait to get this out there. So in closing, just want to say thanks for joining us here on The Greater Good. We hope you are feeling inspired. We hope that we've given you a bit of hope and some positivity to go along with your day. And for us, it's actually the weekend. So that's, or the weekend's coming up. So if you want to learn more about our two guests, places of business and how to get in touch with them, how they can help you, how you can help them, where do they need to go?
SoukupStrategicSolutions.com. That is SOUKUP strategicsolutions.com.
All right.
esuhuff.com. ESUEHUFF.com.
Wonderful. And you can find out more about The Greater Good by going to our website, which is the Guerilla Media. Actually, it's guerillamedia.tv. And that's spelled GUE, not the regular gorilla. So go to guerillamedia.tv and just go up top and click on the Greater Good tab. You're going to not only see shows, but you're also going to see future events and different things that we're doing around the community that other people are doing for the greater good. So you can also find us on social media, on Facebook, Instagram, and we're going to share all of that stuff with us. So just make sure you check that out and get involved on our socials. And if you would like to reach out to us, you can. It's 239-450-5357. I got to make sure I'm getting this stuff right. You can help spread positive messaging and positive programming by just calling us, and we would love to hear your story. We would love to, if you want to sponsor the show, we would love to have sponsors. But the show is going to be on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Amazon, Pandora, Facebook, LinkedIn, you name it. Thanks to Tim and Diana here at Studio 239, and thanks to Wallace Entertainment for helping to spread the word. And I'm going to leave you with this. How are you going to affect the greater good today? Whatever you do, make sure you leave it better than you found it.